how through Canton Town on a cold and stormy night, with the snow blowers roar and taillight arrows, a case not black nor white. Oh, the truth must show through snowbanks deep and dramas glow. With solo cups out high we flee. What really happened to poor John O'Keefe? Carolyn, she took the stand with the world glued to the stream. The whispers flew like nor'easter winds. Was it love or a deadly scheme? Oh, the justice flow like vermin round the backyard snow. With neighbors watching cold and tight. Did you pack up wrong with the frame that night? They say the party raged indoors while John lay still in snow so wide. But some cry out, this doesn't fit.
Hey, you guys, it's Mo from Mo in the Deep End, and we are going to wrap up on day 13, but we're also going to go back to day 12 and kind of cover all of Yuri. Well, Yuri the Confused, or Yuri the On Point, or Yuri the Integrity Man. I don't know. I am still traumatized by the Raider of the Barren Womb text that we got. I mean, women from sea to sea were as dry as the Sahara Desert after the awkward communications of yesterday. Now, this is what has always struck me weird about human communication, relationships, and everything else, and why I desperately cling on to the tiny, minuscule hope that I am, in fact, ET. I have been sent here to observe you all, and they are racing home to come find me because humans are ridiculous. You have Karen seeking validation and desperately wanting this man to come over, and this man being confused as all get out. It is like watching two people, one speaking Mandarin and one speaking Yiddish, trying to talk to each other, and they're talking past each other. I, as a casual people watcher of epic proportions, have never understood how people can't just say what they're thinking when they're thinking it. Again, filter no mouth, or mouth no filter over here, and then continue forward as with honesty and just out without all of this ridiculous miscommunication. That being said, let's get back up here. So on day 13, we start back with Jackson continuing to cross Butnik. Now, I did go back and I did say that the direct on Mr. Butnik, Yuri, was pretty good. Again, the state is doing their darndest to downplay that John Proctor was at all involved in this case. He was a co-lead. Yuri was there all times with him, holding his hand, walking. They put the evidence together, they held hands, they talked about their feelings, all of that crap. So pretty much normal. Yuri does talk incredibly slow, so if you are going to do a rewatch, I would put it at 1.25 with the knowledge that we are already watching it generally most times at 1.25. Uh, I will say this particular trial, I think Jackson and the defense have now um, come up with a strategy, at least this week, it seems, that they understand now the sort of tools and tricks that the witnesses are going to be using to try to get around their past testimony and their past sort of statements that can be mitigated. So opening or after Jackson I think he's settled down and he understands and he was able to keep himself pretty calm. He kind of established what Yuri was going to do. Yuri is only accepting the divine, reports written by himself or his fellow troopers as authentic. Anything else is not, he doesn't know. It doesn't have a watermark. He can't, vouch for it exclusively. Um, so it was tedious, it was upsetting, but I think that Jackson did a really good job of showing where these pieces were found, the suspension of disbelief you have to have after the snow is melting, that pieces the size of 7 inches to 6 inches were found just the day after there had been a search. Again, there was no tag, no report. It was rather damning. We went a lot into Brian Higgins and what he was doing, why he had, called Brian Albert that night, why he was the one that turned over text, why his phone wasn't, looked at, especially when it did look like Karen was reaching out to cheat. I don't like cheaters. I think this is a bad look. And as much as juries try to keep their emotions out, or they're supposed to, this might be a no-go for some people. I do know people that are like, "Cheaters? No." Now, hopefully, the jury can look at Karen as a, fully faceted person in a complicated relationship that didn't handle it the way I would've, but this doesn't mean she's guilty of a crime. That being said, there were questions as to why they didn't exactly take the phone, and there were a lot of questions about the timeline because at the point that they had seized Karen's car, they had only found the broken cocktail glass and assumed that it might have been a DV where John got glassed or bottled in the face or in the back of the head. So that's a lot of what they did in the morning. And then we got a lot of reports of 20 reports basically that were all authored by Michael Proctor. Again, underlying that, yes, in fact, Michael Proctor was the lead investigator, the lead trooper on this case, regardless of what they have nomenclature now of what that particular, position is. At that point, per their policies, he was in charge of this case. And it went on to show that there were so many times that Michael Proctor, was the one to find these things. It was never properly, tagged, no cross coordinates. Apparently, myself and Yuri learned what cross coordinates were, which was, learned something new every day, which was interesting. Then we went into Chief Berkowitz on February 4th. The aged and fairly nearsighted chief of police, while driving at speed, um, past Fairview Drive, found a piece about this big. Now, that wouldn't be such a problem, except on the 4th or the 10th, they found bigger pieces. So you're telling me that the septuagenarian, nearsighted, uh, police chief just decided or just saw at the corner of his eye this red piece of plastic on a lawn that already had, and we could tell by photos, had red leaves. Now, I do want to go back a little bit to a shirt because it has been brought up online. John O'Keefe's shirt and pants both had grass stains on them. Now, according to some of the things I've read online, so take this with a mountain of salt, if the ground were truly permafrostly frozen like the, Siberian tundra, he wouldn't have gotten grass, mud stains, or things like that on his clothing when he landed. I find it especially interesting that he had a lot of dirt and mud on the front of his shirt. I will have to go back and relook at it. But there were some pretty big stains here on the front of his shirt. So that's something I do want to look at later. I love that I have notes and then I forget how I've organized them. Then there was a lot of generalization, which again, I question how Aperture, the state's expert reconstructionist, is going to reconstruct anything when so many things were found in a generalized area. Now, I'm not a mathologist, but I would think you would have to have exact I'm not a mathologist, but I would think you would have to have exact sort of, measurements to figure out exactly how physics worked. I would think that, science people would need exact, you know, as close measurements as you can get, even if you're using cross coordinates or things like that, in order to get a fulsome picture of what happened. That being said, it was a lot like it was near about the flagpole. Thus far, I have yet to figure out the general orientation, exact orientation of where John was. That being said, he was questioned, "Do you think you did a good job? Do you think this was up to standards?" Of course, he found that they had always been up to standard. which, whatever, dude. Sure, Jan. And then we saw footage of Brian Albert and Brian Higgins doing, the abdominal. Now, Yuri in the worst pick on Celebrity Jeopardy ever in Turd Ferguson fashion, like he was on SNL and just destined to get the exact most dumbass answer ever, said, "Well, it looks like he's giving him the Heimlich maneuver." It looked like they were playing grab ass, let's be honest. It looked like they were horsing around, goofing off, even to the point where they were pushing tables. Now, then we kind of jumped around and we got to the Ring video showing Karen's car, the right rear, quarter panel hitting John's, Yukon. Now, Yuri had to watch the video 3 times because the first time he wasn't paying attention, and the second time he is a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and apparently all the little fluttering flakes, messed with his eyesight for movement. So by the 3rd time, he did admit that there could possibly be movement of the car. Now he doesn't think it was a big hit, but he saw some movement possibly because he's a big old douchebag. Then we brought up the dog Chloe. Now, I will get into the chats, but this is let me avoid them for a little bit more. We went into Chloe and, the veterinarian and what he did to verify that this dog was the same dog that was given away. A lot of people, found it a little interesting that a 7-year-old dog would be given a new name that, there were no records other than the records that the new owner gave the vet. And on the report that was given to the defense, no identifying information was given so they could send their people, look at reports, ask questions. That's a different thing. Then we go on and uh, Jackson talked about the timely writing of reports, and it was brought to light that it, of so these are going to be a lot of numbers, but let me throw them out to you. 11 reports were 300 days past when they were supposed to have been reported about. So best practices are to do reports as contemporaneously to the time as you can to keep all knowledge fresh, to give the most accurate and detailed reports that you can. 11 reports were delayed by 300 days. 3 reports were delayed by 400 days, and 5 reports were 500 days late. And there is still one report that was 581 days delayed before they actually wrote about it. Now, this was highlighted by Ricky Dentono and Heather Maxon, both past. No, Ricky was driving. This is Ryan Nagel. They were in the car with Ryan Nagel. They were not interviewed until nearly a year and a half later. So a year and a half until they actually got, interviewed. Now let's get into these texts because Yuri in his, well, look, never fence with a verbal master, Yuri. You're not equipped at all. He decided to be cute and said that he couldn't, authenticate, couldn't remember, and didn't think that the text between Brian Higgins and Karen Reed were flirty. So Yuri and the rest of us had to suffer through nearly 3 hours of the world's most cringe, ridiculous text. Again, as a person who sometimes doesn't know when to not say the truth and or how to interact in human society, the ability to dance around the truth between 2 people instead of honestly admitting what they want was maddening, not to mention that either Brian is oblivious or he knew it was an Admiral Adbar attack or a trap and was wishy-washy to the point of teenage girls. I know them, I was one, and, well, the wishy-washy of myself. They were horrible, they were horrific. I do not recommend anyone watch them, but I will be getting screenshots so I can do a dramatic reading, because that's what the world needs. That being said, I will say that I think the defense has found their groove and understands, where they can push witnesses and how to do it in a calm fashion, I mean, we still get those little zingers in, we still get the thesaurus thing in and the dictionary in, but I think it conveys information in such a way that is easy to digest, and it shows how FUBAR this investigation was. That being said, I do think that the state is smart trying not to bring in Proctor, but I don't know that the damage can be negated. I think that, Yuri has not done a good job. But that's just my opinion. Please let me know yours. Thank you for allowing me to give you breakdowns and following me all the time. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Remember, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, but have a sassy mouth and carry a can of bitch fire because kindness doesn't equal doormat. Bye, you guys.